Hello everyone, how are you doing? So great to be back here again. We've been doing this in New Orleans for, this third time? This is third time now. Wow. Loving this venue, very special. And so without further ado, I'm gonna get right into the talk. So I'm going to be talking about Vue and Vite Updates, latest status. So first of all, Vue is now 10 years old. So to me, it is still quite, still feels quite surreal that this project has just been out here for 10 years. Feels like an eternity in front-end time. Like 10 years ago, when I first started working on Vue, I still remember most of the tools that we use today don't even exist back then, right? So it feels like I've witnessed like this long history of front-end, just like we're coming up with weird ideas and things come, frameworks come and go. I remember in the early days when I was working on Vue, there were like 40 different implementations of to-do MVC, and I think there are probably a few of those frameworks alive nowadays, and Vue happens to be one of them. So, yay! Vue today in numbers. So today we in both of the repository that we have on GitHub. So there is the Vue.js/Vue, which is the Vue 2 repository, and the Vue.js/core, which is the Vue 3 repository. Combined, we have over 9,000 commits. We've done 499 releases up to this. I probably should have pushed the patch release this morning so we get 500. And no. Doing live release on stage, that's probably too risky. We have 2 million users worldwide, 250,000 plus GitHub stars, close to 5 million weekly NPM downloads, and over 1 billion monthly CDN requests on JS Deliver. And this is not accounting for other CDNs. So we've come a long way. And I also want to mention we did have a lot of technical impact along the way. In a way, because it's a 10-year-old technology, it's kind of no longer the kind of hip, newest kid on the block kind of tech. But along the way, we've made some pretty important influence to other frameworks as well. So Vue was the first framework to do deep tracking-based reactivity. So this is a lot of text. So I'm just gonna quickly go through them. It was the first to combine the idea of single file components with build tools. Composition API was the first to combine signal-style reactivity with modern component models. And in case you don't know, the reactivity model that we use on, which is now widely referred to as signals, is becoming a TC39 proposal. It is now at stage 1, which means it has the potential to one day become official part of the JavaScript language. So when that happens, Vue might be able to just rely on native signals as the underlying implementation, but we will be able to retain the same API surface because we were involved in this conversation with the standards body, with other framework authors, to make sure that the standard will be compatible with what we need to do in Vue. Vue was also the first to explore compiler-powered reactivity sugar for signals. Anyone here remember reactivity transform? Okay, not a lot. Well, we decided to not go in that direction because we felt that was not the best direction for Vue. There are other frameworks exploring this area, which happens to have a lot of overlap with what we tried. So we're happy to leave that to other frameworks to fill that niche, but I think we're better off focusing on what we have. And then Vue is unique in supporting both templates and virtual DOM render functions, and pioneer the concept of the progressive framework, i.e. a framework that is coherent but incrementally adoptable. A lot of Vue users probably begin their journey with Vue by simply using Vue through a script tag from a CDN. That is the easiest possible way for you to get started with a framework, and it still works to this day. That was what got a lot of people into Vue in the early days, and we kept that usage supported all the way through. Despite other parts of the framework have evolved, and we have a complex, we have a very sophisticated tool chain that allows you to have more advanced and optimized application in production, but still, this base use case we still support it. And you can use as much as you want from the framework. You can use Vue with arbitrary build tools, but we do have officially recommended happy paths right? We have official routing libraries, we have official state management libraries, dev tools, IDE support, right? All these parts of the framework are they are here to give you a coherent experience as a framework, but at the same time, we don't force you to adopt everything if if that does not fit your use case. So looking back, here is a brief timeline in case if you have, I don't know how many of you have learned about the history of Vue. Actually, raise hands, how many of you have been working with Vue for more than 5 years? Wow, quite a few, okay. More than 8 years? Not many, okay. So, going back in history, the first release with the name Vue happened in 2013. So I actually started working on Vue as a side project when I was working at Google, and mostly because I was trying to find something that suits my own needs. When we're doing quick prototypes, I just wanted this really simple template syntax and reactivity without the burden of all the framework level concerns. And initially it was called CJS, and I renamed it to Vue in mid-2013, and worked on it on and off for about half a year until it was first publicly announced in February 2014. So I basically count that as the official date of Vue that was first published to the world. And we reached 1.0 in October 2015, 2.0 in October 2016. And it was in 2016 I started to work on Vue independently full-time. The work on 3.0 was a long journey. It started, the whole idea started in September 2018. And we worked on early explorations, research. We took a lot of we tried a lot of different directions. And it ended up being a pretty massive chunk of work because we decided to migrate to TypeScript. We decided to raise the language support baseline to ES 2015 so that we can leverage the latest language features. And eventually, we did a soft launch in September 2020, right? And the scope of the framework at that point has become so large. As I mentioned, there are many different parts of the framework, moving pieces that we need to make sure to work consistently together to call it a framework, right? So although we got Vue 3 core stable, there are other parts of the framework, like the router, the state management, the dev tool, the documentation, all the tool chain. We need to get all of those up to date, which is why we had to do a soft launch first and slowly get all the other parts to be in sync with Vue 3. And eventually, we got Vue 3 switched to the default in January 2022. Well, that's already 2 years ago. So time really flies. And in December 2023, Vue 2 officially reached end of life. So this is a brief timeline up to this point, right? So essentially, we only finished the transition of Vue 2 to Vue 3 pretty much officially just like a few months ago. And I'm hoping to see more new applications start on Vue 3 as a more solid foundation for moving forward. So during this journey, there were ups and downs. So nowadays, when I go to conferences, a lot of people will come to me and say, like, it's amazing, like Vue has come this far and we've built a community and all that, right? And for sure, I enjoy being at Vue conferences and meeting all the people that use my software. But I want to be honest that like this whole journey, has been numerous times where I was on the edge of burnout and was under, just a lot of stress, especially during the whole launch phase of Vue 3, when there were, I was involved in RFC discussions that were pretty intense, and we had disagreements. We had all these different opinions in the community that we had to sort out and make decisions on. So it was not an easy process, right? And similarly, it's probably the same experience if any of you maintain a relatively popular open source project. It is always going to be mentally draining when you make big design decisions and you want to get the whole community on board. So some of the historical data on GitHub, you can see like this is in 2014 before I launched Vue officially. So I was, hacking very intensively, and after the launch, I was like, I need to take a break. So there were a few months I didn't touch the code base at all. And then I slowly picked it up back again, started fixing issues and trying to push patches and get new features out. But then again, there are periods where you would, during this whole growth phase of an open source project, there will be time where I actually doubted myself and I was like, is this project even a good idea? Some people don't seem to like it, right? And I think over this journey, slowly I started to learn, like, it's okay that there will always be people who disagree with certain things, right? What is important is we make this project as best as it can be for the people who actually like it, right? So over the course of time, there are life reasons, COVID, family, moving around. There are times that I would just like stop working on things to take a break, to recharge. But, my love for open source has stayed the same, right? So whenever I find the energy again, I'll come back to it and we keep pushing things forward. So, and most importantly, it's the support of the community that makes all this possible, right? I couldn't have done this alone. This project has grown to be much more than just a one-man project. Like all these different pieces that I mentioned, the router, the dev tools, the IDE support. Now we have a team of contributors and long-term team members who are actively participating. Some of them are completely owning a certain piece of the framework and working on it for the long run. So, and then we have all these amazing community members who are supporting us along the way and giving feedback, helping us fixing issues. So Vue wouldn't have been where it is today without you all, right? You are part of the community too. So my deepest gratitude to our team members, to the contributors, to the ecosystem library maintainers, to our community partners, sponsors, conference and meetup organizers, Vue advocates and educators, and of course, sponsors not only here, but on our websites, companies that actually, are putting money where their mouth is and supporting the Vue development, supporting the project's sustainability for the long run. So thank you all. And speaking of sustainability, this is something I'm pretty proud of because, interestingly, Vue is currently the only mainstream frameworks that remains independent, right? So we're not dominantly owned back by a single corporation. When this comes up in discussions, oftentimes people who are not familiar with the Vue financial situation often think this is a risk. There's no big company backing it, right? But on the other hand, if you look at the Vue financial history, we have been financially sustainable for all this time. Like we have never been in a state where we don't have enough money to support full-time work on Vue. Like we are actually very, very sustainable because we have a very healthy mix of different sources of sponsorship, educational partners, certificate partnerships, end-of-life support partnerships, right? All these partnerships in the ecosystem combined has provided Vue with a very steady stream of income to sustain not just me, but a team of people working on Vue consistently for the long run. And the benefit of this is we don't rely on a single point of failure. Vue development is not going to stop just because one sponsor decides to back out, because we have so many. And the other benefit of it is we are not going to bend the technical direction due to the influence of a single financial sponsor, right? It is possible when a project is owned by a single for-profit entity for that project to be somehow distorted to become a marketing vehicle for that specific, for the underlying monetization model. And sometimes it could also be that a big company has a project, they open source just because, the team decided to open source it, but in the long run, when the company decides that the investment into the project can no longer be justified, the project ends up being axed, right? So think about Angular 1 when they decided to just completely overhaul everything. Or there are many other past projects that were backed by a big company but somehow no longer exist. So in my eye, this sort of independent nature of Vue is actually the source of its longevity. It is what makes Vue sustainable for the long run. And that's pretty unique in today's open source ecosystem. And that is something we're pretty proud of. And more importantly, I think The Vue ecosystem is also one of the most collaboratively mindset-driven ecosystem. So some examples, right? We have been the source of multiple efforts that benefit not just Vue developers, but the entire JS ecosystem as a whole, right? The most prominent example is probably Vite. How many of you have used Vite? Great. Then we have Volar, which is kind of the backbone of our language tools, the IDE support, right? So Volar actually was refactored to become, the lower base of Volar actually was refactored to become framework agnostic, so that it can support any file format that needs to embed JavaScript or TypeScript in the meta file format, right? So think of Vue single file components. We need to embed JavaScript and TypeScript inside a custom file format. There are other files that need to do this too. For example, MDX need to embed TSX inside Markdown files. Astro components need to embed TypeScript in their own file format. And other projects, for example, Svelte also have single file components. And there are also community members in the Angular community even exploring single file components for Angular. And they were able to leverage Volar to implement IDE and language tooling support for that form of Angular single file components. So this is the power of tooling that is abstracted to become framework agnostic. Is you will give essentially help other communities innovate as well, and that would benefit more developers, not just Vue developers. Other examples include the UnJS organization, pioneered by the Nuxt team. When they were building Nuxt 3, they came up with all these internal packages they needed in Nuxt 3, and they decided to also extract them into standalone packages that can be used in any situation. And that whole collection of packages became UnJS. And inside UnJS, there is Nitro, which is the underlying web server framework that's used in Nuxt 3. And we're seeing other meta frameworks being built on Nitro plus Vite. So that's a very powerful combination. And they're almost becoming this kind of foundation for quickly building different meta frameworks nowadays. And then there are works going on in the DevTools side. So when Nuxt team launched the Nuxt DevTools, we realized there are many similar things we need to do in developing DevTools for front-end frameworks, right? So there are ongoing work in extracting some of the common bases from the Nuxt DevTools so that we can use it to build custom dev tools for other things. For example, if you want to build a dev tool for local API mocking or unit testing results. And we also have a branch of Vue dev tools that's still currently work in progress to leverage the same base. Okay, so let's talk about current and future of Vue. Vue 3 usage, since we switched Vue 3 to the default, in January 2022, right? So that is what is marked here. We've seen Vue 3 usage grown by 500% since it became the default. So it's consistently rising, and the overall downloads on NPM of Vue, the percentage, now constitutes 59.2%, so close to 60%. So I remember taking a screenshot of this number earlier this year, maybe in February. It was still at like 56 or something. So we're seeing pretty consistent and rapid growth, not just in absolute numbers for Vue 3, but also the percentage among all the Vue downloads. 3.4 is the current latest minor release that was released in December 2023. And in this current stage, because I still consider we're in this whole transition state from Vue 2 to Vue 3, I'm pretty sure there are still many companies still kind of working on their Vue 2 to Vue 3 migration or just getting started with Vue 3. So we want to make sure the current Vue 3 do not ship any disruptive changes or features. So we're focused a bit more on quality of life improvements and internal performance efficiency improvements. So in 3.4, we rewrote the entire template parser to make it 100% faster. We also shipped a more efficient reactivity system, which enables better, more efficient caching for computed properties. We shipped a define model, which is a new macro in single file components that drastically simplify the usage of vModel and components. And then we also shipped vbind same name shorthand. So both of these are pretty well received quality of life improvements. So the language tooling side, Volar released 2.0, which comes with a new mode called hybrid mode. So Johnson has been working really hard on 2.0. Unfortunately, during the initial release, there were multiple factors like the broken bugs in the Node.js bundled in VS Code and a number of issues that's out of our control that made the initial launch kind of bumpy. But Johnson has been working really hard in addressing all these edge cases and bug fixes, and Volar 2 hybrid mode has now become quite stable. And the significance of hybrid mode is because when we are trying to provide type checking, type IntelliSense for single file components, we need to essentially provide IntelliSense for the TypeScript language embedded inside Vue components. Originally before takeover mode in Volar 1 early days, what we are doing is we were spinning up 2 instances of TypeScript language servers, one for the normal TS files and one for Vue files, right? So this worked, but it was quite inefficient because we essentially doubled the memory usage on your system. So we've been spending a very long time, a lot of effort trying to find ways to eliminate this duplication. So takeover mode was essentially our first take. Takeover mode essentially means you are going to disable the local TS language server for your TypeScript files so that Volar will take over both the TypeScript files and Vue files, right? So takeover mode worked pretty well. Unfortunately, it does require you to have a per project configuration, and it's quite annoying that you just have to do it every time you go into a Vue project and you like disable local TS server to enable takeover mode, right? So we've been looking for a way to further simplify this, and hybrid mode is essentially the answer to that. So Volar 2.0 essentially is going to be able to mix both Vue files and TS files in the same graph and avoid the duplication while providing you the performance benefits of what was previously only available in takeover mode, but you no longer need to worry about manually enabling it. So that is the work going on in Volar 2. There's also a DevTools Next, which is the intended next iteration of Vue DevTools. I encourage you to check it out at devtools-next.vuejs.org. It is heavily inspired by Next DevTools and actually reuses some of the modules, base modules from Next DevTools. But this is essentially the next incarnation of Vue DevTools as intended for projects, Vue projects that are not on Next.js, right? Because Next.js DevTools is amazing, but it'd be even better if non-Next.js users can also benefit from. So this is what Vue DevTools Next is intended to do. There are some pretty fancy features like component graphs. It has a command palette that allows you to quickly locate features. Strongly recommend you check it out. It's also pretty flexible because it can be distributed not just as a Chrome extension. You can in fact use it as a Vite plugin. So you just install the Vite plugin and it's injected into the current page you're working, right? Or it can be loaded in a separate window. I believe it also supports being packaged as a standalone app. It's pretty flexible because we're using, web-based technologies, so you can pretty much run it everywhere. So a great shout out to Web Fans Please, aka Arlo. He's the lead developer on Vue DevTools Next, and he's been working on it pretty hard in the past few months. And Vapor Mode. So we've been talking about Vapor Mode for quite a while now, and the development has been going on pretty consistently. So Vapor can now run to-do MVC. So we've already implemented most of the basic features like most of the directives, most of template syntax support. So if you're using it to build basic UI features, you can actually already do it. It's not quite stable yet, but it's in early days, obviously. So I recommend you to try it out in the playground, get a feel of it. And most interesting part is looking at the compilation output to see how it is different from the today's virtual DOM-based output. Right. So for those of you who are not familiar with Vapor Mode, it is a different compilation strategy that takes the exact same Vue single file component, but it compiles into something different, something that is more closer to the manually optimized code you would write by hand. So compared to the virtual DOM-based version, it will be able to use less memory and run more efficiently and better leverage the fine-grained reactivity that Vue's reactivity system offers. So VaporMode's current focus is on component support, and we're almost there. Right? So I will share the slides later, but this link will take you... Oh, I have no internet. Okay. So, but this link will take you to the current implementation status of the component features, and we're pretty much 80% there. So there are few features left, and once we tackle that, the next steps for VaporMode will be Virtual DOM and Vapor interop, which means you will be able to start using Vapor components inside your existing Vue 3 application. There's no migration needed. It's completely opt-in. Actually, you can opt in at per component level. And the likely way to opt in per component is by changing your script setup tag to script Vapor. And nothing else needs to be changed. It's 100% the same syntax, same API. Except some features are not implemented yet. For example, built-in transition components or keep alive. The built-in components are in the next steps, but the basic features, everything that's supported so far, uses exact same syntax and API. So shout out to the Vapor team. So we have Kevin, aka XXZZ, he's been the lead developer on Vapor, and we also have great contribution from other community members, Little Sound, Ubege, and Dr. Wu, who recently joined the Vapor team to make more significant contributions. So 3.5, so Vapor is basically going on in parallel with the current main branch. Current main branch does have 3.5, which is already in alpha, and it already has landed some pretty significant improvements. So there are two noticeable pull requests that already landed. The first one is we refactored the reactivity system once more. So this time, the focus is on improved memory usage, right? So in 3.5, the reactivity system overall uses 56% less memory. So that's pretty significant improvement. And in our benchmarking, memory usage can actually have real runtime performance impact, because the more memory you use, the more time the engine will spend in garbage collection. And garbage collection oftentimes is actually a performance killer in modern JavaScript. So by reducing memory usage, we induce less memory garbage collection over time and ensures your application runs more smoothly. Right? So another pull request refactored the way that the reactivity system interact with large collections, for example, arrays with 10,000 elements. The Vue 3 previous implementation, because we have to run a proxy in front of these large arrays, right? Access to these elements are slower than access to native arrays. So that actually resulted in some performance bottlenecks when dealing with these large data collections. But this PR actually used smart ways to kind of work around these issues by instrumenting array access methods. So now interacting with these large arrays become 10 times faster in some cases. So both of these will essentially make the reactivity system much more efficient without any changes needed. So we're pretty excited about that. And then the other side of 3.5 that's currently work in progress are SSR, server-side rendering related improvements, including lazy hydration, suspense stabilization, and use ID. Okay, so that is for Vue. And now I want to talk about Vite. Vite is, in fact, now already 4 years old. Sounds actually strange because to a lot of people, this still sounds like pretty new technology, right? But in fact, the work on Vite started more than 4 years ago. So this is the tweet that I first talked about Vite in public. Essentially, I was working on a local native ESM-based dev server. I wanted a dev server that has a no build step and support Vue single file components, and I want hot reload. Sounded too good to be true back then, and I've been kind of noodling on this idea actually for a very long time, because before this tweet, I actually already had a prototype in 2023 called @vue/dev server that was able to load Vue single file components over native ESM. but I just couldn't figure out how to do hot module replacement. So this tweet was essentially, one night I was like, it just clicked. I know how to do hot module replacement with native ESM now. So I hacked until 6 a.m. in the morning and got a proof of concept working. And that was the start of Vite. So here I want to take you through a quick recap of the history of Vite, because it's been a pretty wild ride. So this purple line you see at the bottom is the download count, the curve that we're seeing, right? So I was tweeting about it over time, and slowly we got in. When I was working on Vite, we started looking at other implementations. There were some other projects exploring similar technology. For example, Snowpack, Web Dev Server, WHMR. All of them kind of gave some inspiration to the Vite implementation, especially in Vite 2. So this is the moment where I decided I want to scrape Vite 1 RC and do a complete rewrite, which later became Vite 2, which ended up being a very good decision, because all the technical decisions, refactors, and making Vite truly framework agnostic was the biggest, probably one of the best decisions I've made over these years. Okay, so I started also working on VitePress at the same time, because I wanted to write documentation for Vite, but I was kind of fed up with how slow VuePress was. So I wanted a version of VuePress that ran on Vite, which later became VitePress. People started picking it up even outside of the JavaScript community. So Maximo here started working on Vite integration for Ruby on Rails. We added so in 2021, we added this very important feature in Vite that supported building, essentially it's a feature called SSR load modules. It allows you to set up your custom server-side rendering setup with Vite very easily during development. And eventually we shipped to Vite 2 in February 2021. And then very quickly afterwards, I decided to set up a proper Vite team, because I know my attention will be split between Vue and Vite. I want a team of people who can consistently push Vite forward, even without me being actively involved at some time. And SpellKit later on switched over to Vite as well. They were originally using Snowpack, but after we implemented the SSR support feature that I mentioned earlier, SpellKit decided that was a much better foundation to build upon, so which ended up in the switch. So that was pretty significant for us back then. And this is Jess saying praise about Vite, because they started using Vite for Cypress component testing. Anthony Su, a lot of you probably have been using his work to some extent, joined Next Labs, and also he has been very critical in the early days of Vite, contributing a lot of changes and fixes. Astro, another framework that is content-based, which is quite popular nowadays, also moved over to Vite. The team were actually the original authors of Snowpack, but after Vite launched, they decided they want to move over to Vite so that they can focus better on higher-level framework decisions. And then the team shipped in Vitest, which is the unit testing tool that is designed for Vite, right? So the story about Vitest is when we started using Vite in production, we still had to use Jest for unit testing. But Jest has its own transform pipeline, which isn't compatible with Vite, which means for a lot of the things, we actually need to configure it twice, once for Vite, once for Jest. And we felt that we really, really wanted a Vite native test runner, and that is Vitest. And then we started working on something called ecosystem CI. This is pretty critical because Vite was starting to become the foundation piece for many other downstream dependencies, and we wanted stability. So we came up with this idea where we have a CI system which will pull in the code and tests of downstream projects, and then we will build Vite based on specific commit, publish it to a local mock registry, then install it in those pulled in projects and run their tests against the latest commit of Vite to ensure stability before we even do a release. This system has proven so successful that we later on backported into Vue. So now Vue also has ecosystem CI to ensure stability with the rest of the ecosystem. And many of you probably know Patak, whose real name is Matthias. He joined StackBlitz to work full-time on Vite. So this was the full external member contributing to Vite full-time and employed by external companies. So this is also interestingly how today a lot of Vite development is going on is we have this successful setup where many team members are employed by companies building on top of Vite and allowing them to dedicate time to contribute back to Vite. So if you are running a company building on successful open source, consider allowing employees to contribute back to open source because that will actually make your own product better in the long run. Then Safi Red is another very important team member that joined. This was his first pull request, which was pretty substantial as the first one. So I'm going to skip over some of the other things. Laravel started adopting Vite. We released 3.0 in July 2022. Quick as a framework adopted Vite. Ryong is another team member who joined. He's now working at Astro. We had VueConf 2022. That was an online event. And then Storybook now has first-class Vite support. SolidStar migrated over to Vite. Nuxt 3 released stable in November based on Vite. All these interesting things in Nuxt 3 started to push in the ecosystem forward alongside with Vite for a unified foundation for meta frameworks. Vite 4 adopted Rollup 3, shipped Vite plugin for React SWC. We had the first offline gathering of the whole Vite team in Vue Amsterdam in 2023. And then we started working on this experimental runtime API for Vite. At the same time, we do see this trend of more and more tools started looking at native tooling, right? Vite, part of the reason why Vite was fast is because we leveraged ES-Build underneath, which was written in Go. So we now see other tools like TurboPack, RSPack, Parcel, Lightning CSS, all kind of starting to leverage Rust to make things faster for JavaScript build tools. So that is an interesting trend, and we're going to do something about it in Vite as well. But at the same time, we do keep improving Vite performance consistently over time, just in this current code base. Like, for example, comparing Vite 4.2 to Vite 4.3, we see very significant improvements in initial page load times. Marco team also adopted Vite. Angular is now actually using Vite as its dev server. Redwood, which is the React Meta framework, moved over to Vite. And then we had VueConf 2023. And then, at which I announced that we started working on Rowdown, which is the online Rust-based bundler that is going to power Vite in the future. And Remix, probably the second largest meta framework in the React world, moved over to Vite. So at this point, among all the meta frameworks out there in the JavaScript ecosystem, Next.js is the only one that's not on Vite at this point. So we do hope that one day in the future, maybe we'll see a version of Next running on Vite so that Vite can become the standard toolchain for the entire web ecosystem. So at this point, Vite has crossed 12 million downloads per week. And we have a huge ecosystem that is cross-framework. Pretty much covers every notable framework in the entire web ecosystem. And we have, on the Vite Discord server, we have an ecosystem channel where most authors and maintainers of these frameworks and libraries are together discussing ideas, exchanging ideas, inspiring each other, and pushing the web forward together. So this is probably the thing that I'm most proud of right now, is that Vite has become this kind of cross-framework, that a vehicle, a shared community for people to kind of exchange ideas, not confined to a single framework. Conclusion, Vite has become the shared infrastructure layer for web frameworks. So with great power comes great responsibility, which is why we want to keep improving Vite from the bottom up without affecting higher level usage. The first thing is environment API. I'll talk a bit about, there will be more details in the next slide. The second thing is we're working on the native bundler, Rowdown, which is going to replace both ES-Build and Rollup inside Vite. And then we're going to, underneath Rowdown, we're also supporting the development of native JS toolchain called OXC. Environment API can be a bit abstract if you don't use meta frameworks or if you don't actually implement meta frameworks. But the gist of it is it is designed to better support frameworks that need to run in multiple environments. Because nowadays, the web cloud deployment infrastructure is getting more and more complicated in a way that sometimes your code needs to run in Node.js. Sometimes it may need to run in a Lambda, in a serverless worker, run on the edge. There are all these frameworks that want to simplify this. So, but at the same time, the same code you write can run in these different environments. And you want to make sure that during local development, they run in the exact same environment that they would run in production to ensure consistency. And previously, this was pretty tricky. So Environment API is essentially a lower level construct to allow frameworks to better support this, so that the code that should run in workers, for example, in a Cloudflare worker, will actually run in a workerd environment locally, even during development. Rolldown is the lower level Rust bundler. We've been working on it for quite a while now. Milestone 1 is complete. We have basic bundling, basic tree shaking. We can handle mixed ESM and CJS. And in benchmarks, we're actually consistently outperforming ES build by a comfortable margin, which is really exciting because there are other things we do want to do on top of that. The next step is achieving Vite and Rollup plugin compatibility in Rolldown so that we can start integrating it into actual Vite. And we also want to support features that were previously not available in Rollup or Vite. That is advanced chunk splitting and potentially module federation in the future. So these are more app-oriented bundling features that we're currently missing in the current version of Rollup, aka and by extension Vite itself. So here's a link to the roadmap, and I'll share the slides later so you can check it out if you're interested. And finally, the very, very bottom of the toolchain is OXC, which Rolldown is built on top of. So we are now supporting the author of OXC to work on OXC full-time. It is currently the fastest JS parser out there, regardless of whatever language you're written in. It is 3 times faster than SWC, which is also written in Rust. It has a module resolver that is 28 times faster than the resolver Webpack is using. It has a linter called OXLint that is a drop-in replacement of ESLint and zero config, and this can link your stuff 50 to 100 times faster than ESLint because it is written in Rust that can leverage all the cores on your machine. There's also ongoing work in natively supporting TS, JSX, and Babel transform directly in OXC so that the whole transform process can run during bundling inside Rolldown, so without having to leverage third-party plugins. So our end vision, there will also be formatter and minifier that's planned for the future. So our end vision is we want OXC, Rolldown, and Vite to form a completely unified toolchain that is able to handle your JavaScript and TypeScript source all the way from source file to AST to linting, formatting, unit testing, transforming, bundling, minification, all the way to production. We want a unified toolchain to handle all of that at native speed. And we want to get that into Vite, which by extension will benefit whatever application you have today that's running on Vite. And that is our long-term grand vision. All of this is currently in the works. We have done a lot, but there is still a lot to be done. So please stay patient, but also stay tuned for updates because I believe this is going to be super exciting when everything comes into place. Thank you.